It was a Sunday afternoon in Minnesota. My brother looked across the room at me. Damn, what are you doing, man? He says, your arms are freaking huge. And my first instinct was to wave it off. Because when I look in the mirror, I still see the guy who needs to keep working. I don't see what he saw, but I let it sit. And what came up wasn't pride in how I looked. It was the 4:30 mornings. It was the soreness that hasn't fully left in months. It was the days I didn't want to get up, and I got up anyway. That's what I felt. The work, the discomfort, 1,000 small decisions to do the hard thing instead of the easy one. And I realized something sitting in that room. I cannot name a single damn thing in my life that matters that actually came from comfort. Not one. This is the Sacred Gentleman podcast. The Sacred Gentleman is a movement that calls men out of comfort and back into God's design, forming leaders of presence, purpose, and generational legacy. I'm Steve Baumgartner, your host. Let's begin. We're going to talk about a few things today that nobody else wants to say out loud. We have built an entire civilization around avoidance of discomfort, and we're paying for it. We see it in our bodies. We see it in our marriages. We see it in our children, and we see it in our churches today. 20 years ago, the landscape looked completely different. I can remember when men were expected to absorb hard things. Now we simply engineer completely around them. We were not built for comfort. We were built for something harder and better than that. Today, I want to talk about why suffering is not the enemy of a good life. It's actually a mechanism within it. I'm going to call out some things that need to be called out. And I'm going to take you back into that room in Minnesota where two brothers sat across from each other, both changed by the hard road, both proof that suffering, when you stop running from it, actually works. This isn't going to be some sort of motivational speech. I'm not here to pump you up. I'm here to simply tell you the truth. And the truth is, the thing that you've been avoiding is probably the same thing that saves you. Let's get into it. I hadn't seen my brother in a couple of years, and that wasn't accidental. We both had made a choice to keep distance. I didn't condone the way that he was living, and he was lashing out at mine at the same time. So we stayed apart. And there's some grief in that when it's your brother, when it's a family member that you just don't talk about and you just carry. But this trip up to Minnesota, it was different. My brother had been sober for about a year, a full year. This is the longest stretch that he had ever had sober. And I was happy to be there to celebrate that milestone with him. But I walked in not knowing what to expect. You build up this version of a person when they're absent from your life. It might be part memory. It might be part fear. It might be part hope. And then when you see them, you have to recalibrate. And that's what I had to do. We were sitting on my dad's old leather couches. All right. So my dad, he doesn't buy new things. He's always believed in just simply taking care and seeing how long something will last. Those couches had been around forever. And they were sitting out in the middle of this big open room in his new house, a house that I hadn't been to yet. It was the house that he bought so that he could take care of my mom better and get her back out of the nursing home. So it had handicap hallways, ramps, wide spaces. And my mom, she had her favorite bookshelf, and it was there too. My dad didn't sit down to read novels. He might read an article out of a magazine or something like that. But he still kept my mom's favorite bookshelf. It was that old 3-piece unit that she absolutely loved. 2/3 of it were completely stocked full of books. She is a huge reader. I guess I should say she was a huge reader when she could read. And then the middle section was filled with china. And it was set up in sections at an angle against the wall. not flat like it had always been my entire life, but bent around this corner in a very odd configuration. At the same time, it looked right. And that's my dad. Everything in its place. It's cared for. It's intentional. And my brother and I were just sitting there talking back and forth, getting to know each other again. And mid-sentence, he stopped. I watched him stand up and walk across the room. His son had just come in. His son had been working, and he stopped by Grandpa's house to take a shower and to hang out with us. And my brother walked straight to him, and he hugged him. Not this half-hearted hug, but a full one, the kind where one guy just completely embraces the other. Not the kind where one guy pats the other guy on the back twice and steps away like you do with your friends, but a full immersion, a real hug. And something came over me watching it. Warmth, just warmth, because I knew what that hug meant. I knew what it had cost. I knew the road that these two had to travel to get to that moment. And my nephew sat right down next to his dad. And they just started going, right? Laughing, giving each other a hard time, just this easy relationship, like they had never lost a day. And guys, I need you to understand something. That was not always the case. These two had been at war, not tension, not distance, but mortal enemies. That kind of damage that looks absolutely permanent, that kind of fracture where you stop imagining that it's going to be anything different than the way that it is right now. But there they were. And it hit me somewhere really deep. It hit me deep because I had lived that story from completely the other side when I was still in the thick of my own addiction. I wasn't the father that I needed to be. My oldest son left home when he was 17, and we didn't speak for years. That kid needed his dad and didn't have one. Me and my wife and our younger kids, we moved to Kansas City here a few years back, and that's where my son lived. My wife started inviting him to dinner, and it was surface level at first. It was careful. And one day he mentioned to me that what he missed most from the Marine Corps was the martial arts. So I invited him to a free session at the gym that I went to. And when I watched him on the mat, and I could see it in him immediately that he loved it. So I went to the counter and I bought him a year, and he accepted that. The professors at the gym, they were friends of mine, and they understood that we were father and son. So they started pairing us together. They didn't know the full story, but they knew that we needed to be together. And we trained and we talked on the mat between our rounds, catching our breath on the floor. Every Saturday morning, my younger kids would be on the mat, and then me and my older son would be on the mat in adult classes. And every Saturday morning after class, we'd walk across the street. Me, my eldest son, my younger kids, and we would walk over to the convenience store to get snacks, protein bars, energy drinks, nothing fancy, but those mornings mattered. And somewhere in all of that, I had apologized to my son. And I don't know if it was the 40th or 50th time. I lost count. I apologized to him so much. And that one day on the mat, I did it again. And he looked at me and he said, "Dad, stop apologizing. I forgave you a long time ago." And I felt this weight leave my body, and my eyes, they started to well up right there on the mat. It was a release from the prison sentence that I put myself into inside my own head. That's what suffering produces when you stop running from it. That's what's waiting on the other side of the hard road. Not just reconciliation, but restoration. Watching my brother and his son across that room in Minnesota, I felt the same thing as I did that day on the mat with my son. Two men, both of them scarred, both changed by what they had walked through. The finding each other again. That's not a coincidence. It's design. But we live in a world that has declared war on discomfort. And I want to name what it looks like because it's everywhere. And to be quite frank, most of us have stopped seeing it. So let me talk about medicine and mental health for a minute. And before I get into this section, I want to be absolutely clear that there are people who genuinely need medication. And when someone needs it, they absolutely need it. But as a society, we have made medicine the first move instead of the last. You mentioned that you're anxious or you get asked by a medical professional about anxiety. Here's a pill. You're depressed? Here's your prescription. What we skipped is the harder question. Have you put in the physical work? Did you do the spiritual work? Have you done the emotional reps? The sitting inside the hard thing until it teaches you something? No, instead we reach for that chemical solution and we rob ourselves. We absolutely rob ourselves of the growth that was waiting on the other side of that difficulty. Sometimes the suffering is the curriculum. And then we opt out before the lesson. Talking about marriage. 20 years ago, you worked on your marriage. Now we have a culture that just exits. The moment that it gets uncomfortable, the moment that the friction rises, we treat that as evidence that the relationship is broken. It isn't. Friction is actually what formation feels like. I know what it's like to almost lose my marriage. I know what it costs to sit inside and choose the hard road instead of the door. And I know what it's like on the other side of that choice as well. The men who don't exit, they actually find what they're looking for. Now, the men who exit, they never find what they're looking for. They end up finding a lighter version of the same problem, one with less history and less trust. With our kids, we stopped parenting and we started befriending our kids. We fight the teacher instead of holding our own kid accountable. We buy them all the things just so that they fit in with society. And then we protect them from the sting of losing. And then we sit back and we wonder why they can't cope or absorb difficulty as they grow up. Everyone is a trophy of participation. And every trophy for participation was a lesson that we as fathers didn't teach. I love my kids. That's exactly why I refuse to be their friend before I'm their father. I'm not saying you can't be both, but you need to be their father long before you can be their friend. Let's talk about men and how we've completely abandoned what we were designed for. This is the one that I probably feel the most. We know things are wrong. We see it everywhere. In our boardrooms, where men nod along to things that they know are completely wrong and against their values. In our culture, where men walk away from God's design toward whatever feels comfortable in the moment. Examples, we watch the normalization of gay and transgender identity, a direct departure from what God designed. And we as men, we stay quiet, not because we don't know what to believe, but because the conversation is hard, because someone might get upset, because we'd rather keep the peace than hold the line. And I'm not saying this with contempt. I'm saying it because I've also been that man. I've sat in the room where something was clearly wrong and I said nothing because the discomfort of speaking seemed like it was better, but it felt bigger than the cost of that silence. It wasn't. I watch men cheer when a company finally stands up to this stuff. You know, they'll forward an article, a meme off from social media. They share that post. They say, finally, someone's fighting back. And then they go back to their own lives and they say nothing. Cheering for someone else's courage is comfortable. Having your own, it's not. And we abandon our values because we don't want those hard conversations. We accept things we know are wrong. because someone else's feelings might get hurt. We want our kids to like us more than we want to tell them the truth. We'd rather lose the argument than risk that relationship. And so the line moves, and it moves back more and more until the man who was supposed to hold that line can't even remember what the line looked like. That silence, it's not kindness. It's cowardice that's hiding under this word of compassion. The man who won't stand on his convictions, he has no convictions worth standing. Oh, and let's talk about church for a minute. You know, I feel like I want to be careful here, but yet I want to be so direct at the same time, because there are churches that have decided that their job is to make you feel good. They have smoke machines, they have lights, they have music designed to hit the emotional centers, and a message that sends you out inspired for the world. And they measure success by how full the seats are. Guys, that's not what church is supposed to be like. That's emotional blackmail. I've sat in those buildings. I've seen the hands up, the music loud. You walk out feeling great. I get it. But you drive home exactly the same man that entered the building. That's not what church is supposed to look like. That's simply a concert that also has a collection plate. Now, real church, real preaching, in my opinion, does two things. Yes, it comforts the afflicted. There's no doubt about that. But it also afflicts the comfortable. Let's get something straight. Christ never said, blessed are the comfortable. He said, blessed are those who mourn, those who hunger, those who are persecuted. That's not the language of a faith that's trying to make you feel good. That is the language of faith that's trying to make you ready as a man. Here's what I've come to believe from living it. Suffering is not an interruption to your good life. It's a mechanism of it. So let me break that down. First, suffering exposes what comfort hides. So you guys have heard me talk about being 320 pounds. I was comfortable on my couch. I couldn't see what I was becoming. Comfort is an anesthetic. It doesn't just dull the pain, though. It dulls the awareness. And my wife called me out. She told me I wasn't in the family even when I was home. She called me out for being physically present, but completely absent. And that hit me like a fist to the chest. But that moment of discomfort, it also cracked something open inside of me. And that crack is where the light got in. If she had stayed quiet to keep the peace, I might still be on that couch out there. 2, suffering or discomfort, it's the forge. It's not the furnace. A furnace burns. A forge, however, shapes. The difference is what you do with the heat. St. Paul is an extreme case. He was beaten. He was shipwrecked. He was imprisoned and left for dead multiple times. And from a prison cell, he wrote letters that have shaped the character of men for over 2,000 years. He wasn't destroyed by what he walked through. He was made by it. The question isn't whether difficulty is coming, because it is. The question is, does the heat shape you or does it leave you burnt? 3, suffering, it builds what that comfort simply cannot. I got up at 4:30 again this morning. It wasn't inspiring. My body was sore. My bed was warm. Every instinct told me to stay in bed. But I got up anyways. Not because I'm a machine, but because I've seen enough times in my own life, the man on the other side of that morning is better than the man who stayed in bed. I know where that other road goes. I've lived it at that 320 pounds. I would come home. I'd eat whatever. I'd watch movies. I wouldn't move. That was comfort. I know exactly where that road leads. It doesn't lead to peace. It leads to this slow erosion of the man that you were designed to be. You become a little less every day and visible until it isn't. My brother didn't rebuild that relationship with his son by finding an easier version of sobriety. He walked through the full weight of it. He sat inside the discomfort of being the man who had caused that damage with his son and stayed there long enough to become someone different. You can't borrow your way through transformation. You have to pay for it. And guys, you already know this. You know it because you've tried those shortcuts, the quick fix, the new program, the book you read, but you end up not living. And 6 months later, you're back in the same place, maybe a little bit more tired. The shortcut isn't faster. It's just a longer way around to the same starting point. 4, suffering shared creates brotherhood that nothing else can. You probably have friends, men you've known for years, men you'd call if you needed to hide a body. But here's the question. Do any of them actually know what's going on inside of you? Not that surface stuff, the real stuff, the fears that you haven't named out loud, the way you feel in your own home sometimes, the gap between who you are at work and who you are at 10 p.m. when the house is absolutely quiet and everybody's gone to bed. Most men don't have anyone who knows that version of them because getting there requires going through something hard together first. My son and I, we didn't talk our way back to each other. We sweated our way back. Saturday mornings on the mat, side by side, catching our breath. And somewhere in all that, the real conversation started, not these surface level ones, the ones that actually mattered. This is a level of trust, a level of knowing that only comes through shared difficulties. Men that have been through something together are different from men who have just been around each other. You can see that in the military. That's the core of real brotherhood, not proximity, shared suffering, shared hardness. I want to slow down here for a second because I know some of you are listening and the honest reaction probably isn't inspiration. It's exhaustion. You're already tired. You already carry things. You have the mortgage, you have your marriage, you have your children, and the job that takes more than it gives. You have kids who need more than you have left at the end of the day. I get it. And the idea that more difficulty is the answer, it's hitting you pretty hard right now. I hear you. I'm not standing here telling you life isn't heavy. Guys, I know it's heavy. I sat at the bottom of those same holes the season right before marriage encounter. I wasn't a good husband. I wasn't a present father. I was a man doing a whole hell of a lot, but yet I was building nothing that mattered. The weight was real. But here's what I learned. There's a suffering that happens to you, and there's a suffering that happens that you choose. I'm not talking today about grief that arrives uninvited, loss, disease, the things that fall without warning. I'm talking about the discomfort that you've been actively avoiding, the hard conversation you haven't had, the early morning you keep sleeping through, the work on yourself you've been meaning to start for over 2 years and haven't gotten out of the gate. The moment with your son or daughter needs to happen, but you've been steering around it because it's gotten to be comfortable. We have to embrace the discomfort for the greater good sometimes. That specific discomfort, the kind that you're choosing to avoid. Guys, that's exactly where the man that you're supposed to be is waiting for you to show up. He's not somewhere else. He's not on the other side of the thing that you keep not doing, the road to him runs through it, not around it. My growth, it didn't come all at once. It came in phases. Every phase required me to walk into something that I didn't want to walk into. Marriage encounter. My wife and I were close to divorce. That weekend, I had to sit inside what I had contributed to that. Not her, but me. The kind of discomfort, it wants to collapse into blame. And I had to hold it without collapsing. And then the work with Jocko. Extreme ownership landed for me because it removed every exit that I had in my life. Everything became my responsibility. Everything. That's not comfortable. That's a posture that closes every door except the one that runs through difficulty and out onto the other side. And then joining this large men's group, this 1,200 man group where we broke up into teams. Everything that you do on your own as a man, that work, it'll eventually plateau. You need men who are in the fight, men who are going to tell you the truth, men who are not going to let you coast. Brotherhood is not a nice to have. It is an absolute essential. It is where the last layer of formation actually happens. 3 seasons I told you about. 3 forms of discomfort chosen. 3 different men I became on the other side of each one. That's the pattern. That is how it works. Not once, again and again across the different seasons of your life. The man that you are at 30, it will need to be forged again by the time you're 40. The man you are at 40 needs to be forged again by the time you're 50. This isn't a one-time event. It's a way of life. Let me ask you something directly. What have you been avoiding? Not in theory, but specifically. What is the thing sitting at the edge of your awareness that you have been steering around? That conversation, that morning habit, the honest look in the mirror, the moment with your kid, you know needs to happen. That thing, that one thing right there. That's the door. You don't need to have it figured out before you walk through it. You don't need to know what's on the other side. My brother, he didn't know what he'd find on the other side of sobriety. He just knew he couldn't stay where he was. My son and I didn't know we'd find each other out on a jiu-jitsu mat. We just showed up to something hard and we kept on showing up. And I'm not talking about the rolling. I'm talking about the conversations we had out there. The formation is when you show up, not knowing what comes next. Stop waiting to feel ready. Readiness is simply a comfort myth. Men who change, they don't wait for the right moment. They move when it's hard, and they let the movement change them inside. If this episode exposed something, if there's an ache underneath that you recognize, I want you to know that there's a path. The Sacred Code is my 12-week masculine formation program. It's not soft. It's not inspirational content that's got this magic little coaching bow on it. It's a structured walk through the 6 domains where men either grow or they've quietly stopped growing. Identity, purpose, vision, discipline, brotherhood, legacy. It's built for men who are done coasting in their life. Men who know something needs to change and are ready to do the work that actually changes it. 12 weeks from now, you could be the man your wife looks at differently, the father your kids feel when you walk into the room, the man who finally stopped carrying the gap between who he is and who he knows he's supposed to be. If that's you, I want you to hit me up on Instagram at Real Steve Baumgartner. The handle's down in the show notes. Let's talk about what the next season of your formation looks like. Guys, this isn't for everyone. And I run it through application process to make sure that it don't just go out to anybody. But it is for the man who's ready to stop choosing the couch and start building something that actually lasts. I want to leave you with this. Somewhere up there in Minnesota, 2 men sat across from each other, brothers, separated by years and choices and damage, laughing like old friends. That didn't happen because life got easier. It happened because they both walked through something hard and stayed in it long enough to come out different on the other side. That's available to you as well. Not the version that skips the hard part, the real version, the one that costs something and builds something that actually holds. You weren't built for the couch. You were built for the forge. And the forge is waiting. I want you to get in it. I'm Steve Baumgartner. This is the Sacred Gentleman. Go take control of your life.